Hello, my name is Monsignor John Kasza, and I'm the pastor of St. James Parish here in Novi, Michigan. And we're continuing our self-help series, and today's topic is that of pornography. Unfortunately, pornography, masturbation, other kinds of sexual topics are not often discussed from the pulpit. The reasons are basically that you have a variety of people in the congregation, children from infancy and all the way through adults who are very elderly. And for most parents, the topic of sexuality is difficult. And there's also the fear of if Father mentions it from the pulpit, parents will have to do some explaining, and it may be very difficult. So this particular topic is really addressed towards teenagers and adults. It's something that you should talk to your children about. It's also something that spouses should talk to each other about. Pornography is one of the largest addictions in the world today. It's even more prevalent than alcoholism or drug use. And the reason is because in the past 20 years or so, pornography has become very accessible through the internet, through live stream media, through books and videos and so forth, and also because, unfortunately, society deems it as a harmless activity. But is it really? Is pornography harmless? Because what ends up happening is we look at these images and these videos that are print media. You say, oh, well, that's a very nice looking person. That person turns me on. That person makes me feel good. The problem is we forget that that person is a real person. That person in those videos, in those media shots, is a child of God. He or she is someone who is just like you and I. And I often will ask people who are addicted to pornography, I said, now, could you imagine your mother or your father in those videos or what have you? And they get grossed out. Oh my goodness. Well, the fact is that those people in those videos, they are someone's son or daughter. They could be someone's father or mother at some point. The second thing that happens with pornography is that unlike some addictive processes, pornography is really a super addiction in the sense that once you become addicted to it, it becomes a stronger and stronger addiction. Some people, for example, are addicted to alcohol and they drink only beer. Okay? They don't have a craving for whiskey or scotch or gin. Other people do have a craving as they increase their desire for that high. With pornography, it's like a drug. It's like cocaine or heroin, where the addiction increases over time. And so, while you may start out looking at just images of individuals, then it increases to individuals doing certain things. And then it increases to individuals doing certain things that are very out of the norm. I'll be very specific. You can start out with just looking at naked pictures. And then it becomes looking at the sexual act. Then it becomes looking at sexual act involving S&M, sadism and masochism, or bondage and discipline, or using paraphernalia. Sometimes it'll be involving looking at people who are using animals or children. And it eventually gets into something called what snuff pornography, where the person that's engaged in the activity ends up getting killed. You see how the escalation of the addiction occurs. That's why pornography is dangerous, because it gets into our brain and we have to have more and more and more for a high. And then pornography destroys people, destroys lives. I've sat in a confessional many times with people who have talked about what pornography has done to their life as a couple, you know, where there's a lack of interest in having intimacy with their spouse. I remember one person who was trying to get pregnant, but they couldn't. And the reason was because they spent so much time looking at pornography on the computer that when it came time to having a relationship with their wife, they couldn't perform, and therefore they couldn't become pregnant. When they stopped the pornography addiction temporarily, and hopefully it's continued, they were able to get pregnant. The other thing that pornography does is it gives us this false image of what the human being is like. We all know that actors and actresses use lots of makeup. We have lighting, and we have all kinds of things that make us look better. So what ends up happening, you have this image of the perfect girl or the perfect guy, and therefore your spouse, your loved one, can never measure up because you've put this image in your brain. Pornography imprints your brain. What can be done when you have this kind of difficulty? Well, it takes a lot of discipline. First of all, you have to sometimes take some very radical steps. There are many pamphlets out there. There's this one, for example, What the Church Teaches About Pornography, which is put out by Our Sunday Visitor. There are other kinds of pamphlets that you can find on the internet about some ways that you can get rid of that addiction. It takes a long time, like any addiction. You start out by acknowledging you have the problem. You then ask yourself the question, what is this doing for me, other than giving me some kind of a high? Then you begin to say, okay, can I imagine my mother or father doing this, or my son or daughter, or my spouse? And hopefully that triggers something and say, ugh, that's really horrific. And then you begin to say, okay, what do I need to do? I need to take steps. Some people need to go for professional counseling because it's gotten so insidious and so much a part of their lives. Other people can just take their collection and throw it out. Other people have developed ways of locking themselves out of their own computer, making sure that they put their computer in a public space so that if they do have the temptation, they'll be thwarted because they're afraid of getting caught. See, in the old days, before the days of computer, a young man, usually men, but women generally don't get involved in pornographic activities much, but a man would go to the bookstore and find the magazine, tuck it under his jacket and walk out and go and look at it in his garage or basement or bedroom. Now, you don't need to worry about encountering any other person, you just go on your computer. So it's a very individualistic act. And so what the church invites us to do is to really say, this person that you're looking at in videos is a child of God. This person has a heart and a soul. This person has a life. And unfortunately, when they're involved in this kind of situation, they're being abused. And by buying pornography, by looking at pornography, we're contributing indirectly to their abuse. We're hurting those people. And so the church invites us really, and God invites us to start praying. If we have this addiction, if we have this difficulty, to pray for an end to it, to seek out help, either through a clergy person or through counseling, and to really acknowledge that this is not what God calls us to do with our sexuality. Although it may be an interesting thing to look at, it may give us feelings, and we may feel really good about it, ultimately pornography destroys not only that person in those videos, it destroys us and can destroy our families. So take some time to ask yourselves, why am I looking at this? Can I see my loved one involved in it? Hopefully the answer is no. And then, what good is this thing doing for me? How is it helping me to be a better person? I'll give you the answer, it's not. So look at ways to get rid of the addiction, and if it becomes so powerful that you need help, seek the help and ask God's grace to free you from this bondage.